Welcome to the Sideline Report. Lou Holder holding it down for Marvin Jackson, who's taking some much-needed time off during the bye week. A bye week that sees the Commanders go to 8-5 after a convincing 42-19 victory over the Tennessee Titans. To help me discuss the game, the season, and what's next for the Washington Commanders, I'm bringing in some family members of mine. My partner in crime every week on this show, Donna Hopkins from Pro Football Plus, Felix Trammell from Fox Sports Radio, and for the first time on the Sideline Report, my man, Scott Abraham, the sports director at ABC7 here in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Sideline Report, y'all.
Well, hey, everybody.
Hey, what's going on?
Great to be here.
This is good. This is good. This is good. Hey, listen, we got a lot to discuss. All right, family, unlike that Dallas game where they were only able to score 3 points in a whole half, 21 points before we even sat down in the press box to start taking our notes. Very, very convincing. 463 total yards, 267 of them on the ground. Scott, I'm going to start with you. What impressed you most about the Week 13 win against the Tennessee Titans?
They controlled the line of scrimmage and they finished. Over the last several weeks, they have not been finishing football games, and it was great to see Washington punch him in the mouth early, and they kept on punching. And you mentioned the rushing stats, 267 yards on the ground. Finally, I think Washington got back to their offensive identity, that balance of getting that run game going, staying ahead of the sticks, making those third downs manageable, 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 1s. That's what you want to see, and I think that's going to be the recipe going forward. Running the football, give me some more Brian Robinson Jr. between the tackles. I like to call it bully ball, and it was great to see the offensive line get that edge back.
Donna, you just over 40 minutes time of possession. They really, really controlled the football. Like Scott said, if you control the line of scrimmage, I mean, you're staying on the field. What kind of impressed you with that time of possession and other things?
Yeah, I think that was so key because the defense had been on the field so much over the last 3 weeks, and the offense would be like long third downs. And that's something that we didn't see in that game, is that they came out and, like Scott said, they put their foot on their necks and they never did let up. And so that's what I like to see, the aggressive play of this team. And Cliff Kingsbury took a lot of criticism over the last 3 weeks. He came out aggressive again, like we saw in those 7 wins in the beginning of the season. So I like the play of the special teams, although the kicking game was not that good, but overall the other pieces of this team was together. And as Bobby Wagner said, this team got back to having fun. That's what they had when they won those 7 games. So I just like the play of this team, the energy that they had when they came out of the blocks. And as I could say from a track runner, they came out the blocks strong. They went down the runway strong, and they finished strong across the finish line.
Yeah. Hey, Felix, you know, Bobby, Joe Witt Jr. said a couple times to us during the season that what he wanted to see from his defense coming down the stretch was stopping the run and producing the football. Man, that was check and check against the Tennessee Titans. 35 yards of rushing for them, and then 2 sacks and 2 forced and recovered fumbles. That defense really came to play in Week 13.
I think we're finally getting to see Bobby Witt's defense prove itself, show itself, and they dictated the line of scrimmage. 35 rushing yards when the rushing defense had been such a problem. Teams have been able to run down their throats. We can go back to that Baltimore game. You can go back to the Steelers game, the Eagles game, where the other team was able to run. They dictated the pace. Tony Pollard had no free room, and I think that just distorted the Titans' offense. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to recover, and by the time they did, the offense had hit 28 points on them. So I think you're seeing Witt's defense finally show its head, and you see them moving pieces around. They've always been plug and playing, and now you're seeing people really step up to the forefront, because we kind of looked up and like, Fedarian Mathis is inactive. We were like, whoa, what is that about? But then you saw the performance on the field, and you're like, well, they understood it. It was there for a reason, and it showed itself. So I think the idea of competition Coach Quinn talked about that. They elevated people because of competition. So the defense is competing. They're really trying to show themselves. And Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu are the trendsetters on that defense, and everyone follows behind them. So it was an encouraging sign to see them dictate and stop the run, because that's going to be their plan for success if they're going to go forward the rest of the season and into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great stuff. And again, like Scott talked about, controlling the line of scrimmage on the offense, defensively too. I mean, that's where you're in the trenches, especially in November and December. That's where you're going to get the job done. So when we were all together at training camp in July and August, if you told me this team was going to be 8-5 at the bye, and the number 2 pick in the draft has worked out tremendously, we all would have signed up for that. Some people would have said, they weren't as good as the early part of the season, and they weren't as bad as the 3-game losing streak. So they're kind of right where they need to be. But I want to ask you, Donna, I'm going to start with you. Your assessment of this team after 13 weeks of play.
Hey, Lou, you're right on target, because I didn't have this team winning. I had them probably winning maybe 6-7 games, but they surpassed what I thought that they would do. I thought that they were going to have a hard time offensive line, because I thought that they needed more depth there. This offensive line has surprised me. I mean, they've had some hiccups a little bit in this season, but overall, they've overperformed where I thought that they would be. Jaden is Jaden. It doesn't surprise me because of his credentials that he had coming in here. And the defense was supposed to be the strength of this team. Again, we had question marks about the secondary, but Michael Sanders still has surprised me, moving from the inside to the outside and hasn't missed a beat. So this team, to me, has probably excelled a little bit more than I expected them. I think the coaching staff has been spot on as far as navigating around the needs with the injuries and so forth. But I think this team, to me, is right where you want them to be after that 3-game skid, and they, woke back up. Now, Michael Sanders still said something after that game. He said, how they come out of this bye week, it's going to be key. And that's what I want to see, is that can they keep the pace in what they did to the Titans to finish up strong? They've got 4 games and they control their destiny. So I really like what I've seen from this team so far this season.
Felix, what assessment would you give these coordinators? I know coming in, we all talked about, hey, how Witt and how Kingsbury are going to be doing their job. We're going to be looking at it a lot. After 13 weeks, what grades do you give them, coordinators?
I think I'd give them B pluses. I think Joe Witt started a little slow, trying to figure out how the defense worked, what players worked, and that's when the defense kind of struggled. You saw that Tampa Bay game. Even in the Cincinnati game, they gave up a ton of points. But now you see the Joe Witt defense, I think, what he wants to see. And I think Kingsbury started off hot. Some teams adjusted to him. But you see the pattern. You see the time of possession. You see the solid running. You see using Jaden legs as much as his arms as a passer, not necessarily as a runner. So I think those things have kind of added up to them doing well. And we talked about their coaching staff. I think Quinn hired an excellent coaching staff, and it's not just the coordinators, but the position coaches. You have so many head coaches on the staff who understand the grind of the NFL, and they're allowed to coach their players. And you're seeing that effect on the players that are on this roster, who are much better players than they were under the previous regime. So I would give both coordinators an A-. They're kind of going in different directions at the moment, but I think they're overachieving with a roster that we know is not fully complete yet. And I think that's the biggest and most encouraging sign. This roster's not finished yet, and they're 8-5. So I think that shows the success of the coaching staff, and especially the coordinators.
Scott Abraham, what say you about the players, coaches, the overall, where they're at 13 weeks in?
I remember during Dan Quinn's introductory press conference, I asked Coach Quinn, do you view this as a rebuilding situation? He quickly responded with the word recalibration. Let me tell you, they are way ahead of schedule. I had them at about 7 wins going into the season, and it's been awesome to see the bar that's been raised already. The fan base is getting a little greedy, right? That it's amazing they were 7-2, and then they had a 3-game losing streak, and they're still 7-5 and now 8-5. This has been a fantastic start to the Quinn and Adam Peters era in Washington. If you're a fan, you could not have asked for a better season, because you don't want to get too far ahead, but looking down the road, you're going to have a lot of salary cap space. You have extra draft picks. You just traded for Marshawn Lattimore, who's expected to make his debut coming out of the bye week. You have finally a young quarterback that's probably going to be a superstar for many years to come if he stays healthy. So the future looks extremely bright for this franchise, and in year number 1, home run so far by everybody involved.
Meaningful football in December. It's what we all want. It's what we all want. So they got 4 games when they come back from this bye, 2 of them at home against division leaders in the Eagles and the Falcons right now. Dan Quinn would never look ahead, because he said, I remember him telling all of us, the most important fight is the fight that you're in. So he will not go to the postseason, but we can on this show, as far as what do you think will be happening in the 4 games that they have left? Anyone jump in first? Where you see them going in the 4 games that they have left?
This is set up so perfectly for this team, because it's divisional games within what you're talking about. You got Dallas to end the season. You got Philadelphia that you can get back, because that game up in Philly, they actually were in position to win that game. And it depends always of how this team comes out of this break. And as Dan Quinn said, that the needle was almost empty. So they needed this break and they needed that win. But I mean, Atlanta is struggling right now. You take the Saints, but no team is a guarantee. That's the key thing. The Commanders are the people that, as they say, they can't worry about nobody else. They got to worry about themselves. But this team could actually, if they play the way that they're capable of playing, they could win the rest of these games. They really could, because they've got the tools on the offensive side and the defensive side to really run the table if they play the way that they should and are capable of.
I think the magic number is going to be 10. 10 wins, and I think Washington gets into the playoffs. Certainly, as Donna said, they can win all these football games remaining on the schedule. I like the situation going into New Orleans coming off the bye week. New Orleans isn't going anywhere, not much to play for. You have Marshawn probably making his debut. You have Jaden Daniels returning to Louisiana. I'm telling you, the kid's going to put on a show inside the Superdome. This is going to be a very important game for Jaden. And then you have Philly, Atlanta, Dallas. I want to see Atlanta, how they handle a cold December game. They're usually a fast track meet type of a team playing indoors. Kirk Cousins, I can see them getting 2 wins rather easily out of these 4. No game's easy, but 10 wins, they're going to go to the playoffs, guys.
I'm circling that Eagles game because I want to see how they were very timid. And even being timid, they had the lead in the 4th quarter, like Donna mentioned. So I'm interested for that game to see how they attack those divisional games, because they were kind of flat. They were flat in the Philly game and they were flat in the Dallas game. And I think that ended up biting them in the end, because Dallas was trying to give them the game and they wouldn't take it. So I think the assertiveness of approaching those division opponents, like, take their will. Like, Philly's going to be coming off of playing the Steelers. They're going to be beat up just like the Commanders did when they played them the first time. Can you lean on them? So those two divisional games are key, but I agree with Scott. 10 wins and you're in.
All right, exciting for the fans, exciting for the players, and exciting for the media that has to cover this every single year. Last year, we didn't get to cover much. I mean, they've already doubled their win total, so it's happy, joy for us as well. We're going to take a break, but when we come back on the Sideline Report, we're going to discuss who I think are the MVPs of this team so far. So stay with us. Sideline Report continues. All right, welcome back to the Sideline Report. Lou Holder, along with Donna Hopkins, Felix Trammell, and Scott Abraham. The sounds that you just heard of Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz. Man, I think that those two, for me, are the MVPs of this team. Not only the talent, but what they've provided in leadership. this franchise and this team has been a rudderless ship for years. They had a lot of talent, but nobody to lead that had Super Bowl caliber rings on their fingers to tell them what to do, and even in adversity, which we saw in the last 3 games. So I'm just amazed at how the culture, the locker room has turned around in a year. And those are the first 2 people that they brought. One of the first 2 people that they brought in were Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner for moments just like this. So I want to hear from you guys. Scott, I'll start with you. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think's been the overall impact of Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz to this football team?
You can't put a price tag on their wisdom, their experience, all the adversity, the ups and downs they've been through in their NFL career, to be able to carry that into a Commanders locker room that needed a refresh, a restart. And those are the type of guys you build a culture around, you build a foundation around. And they've had the perfect touch with those young players in the locker room, having a Bobby Wagner take it upon himself a couple of days before that Titans game and talk to the players and tell them, let's find their edge back. Don't worry about what's being said outside the walls of Ashburn. And they listen, right? There's a respect there. Bobby's going to be a future Hall of Famer. He's going to be wearing the gold jacket. And for them to pick Washington, to want to come to Washington and play in Washington, that's a big step in the right direction for this franchise, because for so many years there was a dark cloud in free agencies. Free agent players didn't want to come to Washington, didn't want anything to do with it. But having these guys help kickstart this culture and what Dan and Adam want to create, you can't put a price tag on that.
Felix, I want to read some milestones to you. Bobby Wagner, 13 straight seasons with over 100 tackles, and Zach Ertz, his 50th career touchdown pass. I mean, just their resumes are unbelievable. And like Scott said, the fact that they wanted to come here has spoken volumes.
I think the cachet of the front office of the Adam Peters is the reason why these 2 are here. And I think that puts it out to the league that, hey, Washington is a different place. This is a place to come and succeed. And we have 2 guys who kind of go about it the right way. They're not the flashiest guys in the world. They're not the me's and all that stuff. They're very underassuming, except on the football field. They do everything the right way. And that's the leadership that Dan Quinn wants to instill in this team, because like you said, this was a rudderless ship. There was nobody to lead, and there was false leaders. There was always the guys that would stand in front of a microphone and say things, but they didn't lead like that. You didn't see that play on the field because, like Coach once told me, the film never lies. And so you see those sort of things happen, and you're like, what's going on? But then you see a Bobby Wagner, you see a mistake. Like you'll see him pick somebody up. I saw something that was just as innocent as whatever. The ball was just floating down the field, and it was a turnover and downs. And instead of the ball boy coming to get it, Bobby Wagner jogs over and gets it and hands it to the ball boy. Just little stuff like that. And that you'll be shocked what young players see in a professional like that. That rubs off. And professionalism is something that's been absent from Washington for so long. And so to see that in Zach Ertz and see that in Bobby Wagner, everyone else in the locker room, what can you say at that point? Because those milestones speak for themselves. So I think that's contagious, and I think that just speaks for the cachet of Adam Peters and the front office and Dan Quinn and the coaching staff he assembled.
Yeah, Donna, we've been covering this team for years. And we remember Joe Theismann was talking about when he used to play for Joe Gibbs, and he said that we were a bunch of characters that had character, right? And I see that happening a lot with this locker room, Donna. All the times we've been in there, there's a bunch of characters. We've interacted with them, but they all seem to have character as well, and you can't put a price tag on that either.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say I've been covering this team for forever. And this is the funnest I've had in a long time covering this team because of the people there. But let me change gears a little bit. Those players that you called out, key. But I got to give the MVP to the coaching staff because of what Dan Quinn has instituted within this group of guys and everything. He is so passionate about these guys. He said the most important thing to him is this team and the people that's on this team. And then when you talk about a Joe Witt, when you talked about Bobby Wagner, he said that he's giving Bobby Wagner the reins to call plays on the field. That's confidence. So that comes from coaches believing in their players. So when you look at the coaches that they assembled here, it wasn't by accident that they brought in the coaches that they did. I mean, a running back, Coach Lynn, and Tapp, who played here, and they knew each other, and then Coach Norton and all of those guys that know some of these players that we're talking about. So when you talk about success, MVPs, and all that, it has to start with the coaching staff of what they put here and what they're putting in those. Look at how Brian Robinson is running the ball this year under Coach Lynn. And then even Chris Rodriguez, who has gotten new life being pulled in, out, let go, and all of those things, but still comes back and busts 90 some yards. But when you look at just this coaching staff and what they built with this team, that's something special. Like I said, I'm having fun.
Yeah, I guess you could even take it a step further with Adam Peters and Josh Harris. The whole thing is working out. They just hired a president, Mark Klaus. So, I mean, now all the pieces are in place for it to be a legitimate. I mean, the NFL wants Washington to be right. They have been embarrassed for so long, just like we have, because one of these crown jewels of the NFL has been a mess, and now it's all coming together. I want to jump to the NFL now, a bigger picture, and talk about two teams up 95 that actually played each other on that same day. The Washington Commanders played the Tennessee Titans, the Eagles and the Ravens. The Eagles beat the Ravens, but how the Eagles beat the Ravens was very, very interesting. The Ravens have been long known for having a great defense and an automatic kicker. I never thought I would say this, guys, but the Ravens are now losing games because of Justin Tucker. 3 missed field goals. He has 10 on the season. What is going on with the Ravens?
Well, go on, Scott. I'll let you jump in.
Father Time catches up to everybody, right? I mean, Justin Tucker looked unstoppable for so many years. I mean, he's still the greatest kicker of all time, but, you got to wonder the wear and tear on the body, the hips, the legs. You just don't know what he's going through. And I tell you what, the Philadelphia Eagles just continue to impress me. That defense is nasty. Those cornerbacks, those young cornerbacks, are a reason why they're nasty, because they're locking down the outside, allowing the big boys to eat up front. That defensive line, those defensive tackles are having their way controlling the line of scrimmage. So I'm willing to probably wave the white flag and give Philly the division. I think the Eagles are going to be a tough out in the NFC. I would love to see that matchup with Philly and Detroit potentially down the road, because you have a high-powered Detroit offense and a Philadelphia defense that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, this is a fun time of the year. And going back to Baltimore, their kicker, I think, ended up having a new holder to hold the ball. Remember back then, some years back, when Washington was missing a lot of field goals, Dustin Hopkins, and, they changed the holder because they let him go. And that could be some of his problems. But, all-pro kicker right now is going through a rough time. But guess what? The Ravens still believe in him because they're not trying to let him go. And I would have been letting him go a couple of weeks ago when he kept missing. You're talking about 10. But when you look at the Ravens right now, they're not letting Lamar Jackson be Lamar Jackson. Lamar is taking on too much of his old self again. They've got Derrick Henry. Run the ball. Because they'll let Derrick Henry run the ball, and then they'll go back away from him and then go back to the old way of doing things that did not get them far. Because I think right now is that Lamar is trying to press too much instead of, just using the people that surround him, because he doesn't even look solid right now. And like Scott said, that Eagles team that started off out of the blocks really slow, and we didn't know what was going to happen. It was some inner squad fighting between whomever there. But they have turned the pages, and the way this team is playing, they're a dangerous team. But I like Detroit. Okay, I think Detroit, you better watch out for that team right there.
Did Felix jump in?
Yeah. I think the Eagles' difference is Saquon Barkley. And I don't know how the Giants let him get down the turnpike to the Eagles, but that's the difference. And we've seen Jalen Hurts kind of sputter a little bit, and the Eagles offense not be as good with the receivers they have. But in the fourth quarter, here comes Saquon Barkley. And you're like, you've been trying to do with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts legs, and next thing you know, it's Saquon Barkley. So I think that's the biggest difference in the Eagles. I agree with y'all. Detroit is the team to beat. And if you have to play Detroit in that dome, that's going to be tough. However, the Eagles figured themselves out. That defense is mean. Those defensive tackles are elite. It covers up some of the other issues they may have in the linebacking core because you can't get to the linebackers. So the defense just grinds the game out until Saquon Barkley can figure it out. But I don't think the Eagles will get to the 1 seed. I think that's Detroit's to lose, but Detroit does have to play Minnesota. They do have to play Green Bay.
Buffalo Bills. Detroit has to play Buffalo too.
And they got to play Buffalo. So that's a tough little road, while the Eagles, I think, just have the Steelers, and then the Commanders, they finish with like the Giants, and they have the Panthers as well. So I think that's a little bit easier road for the Eagles. But the Ravens, I think Justin Tucker, as a Texas Longhorn fan, it breaks my heart. But I think he's a power kicker. He's a power kicker. And once that power gets out your leg, you don't quite got it no more. So hurts my heart, but I don't think you can let him go, because I think he's a kicker. He'll find another spot, and all of a sudden the light switch goes back on. So it's hard to cut a Hall of Famer, but you might have to.
Yeah.
And as always, horns up.
And the Ravens and the Commanders have the same record, 8-5. 8-5. I mean, so it's amazing how lethargic the Eagles looked at the end of last year and how they've turned it around with the #1 defense. I mean, a lot of people in Philly definitely would say that Sirianni's up for the coach of the year because of what he's been able to do. But I tell you, this is probably the year that I would give co-MVP, co-coaches of the year to Mike Tomlin and Dan Quinn for what they've had to do. Mike Tomlin for that standard of excellence, and Dan Quinn, what he's been able to do. If things play out, I don't know how you can keep those two out of conversations for Coach of the Year. What say you guys really quick before we roll out of here?
I'm right with you. I think that what they had to do with what was handed to them this quickly with Dan Quinn is pretty impressive.
Quickly. Scotty?
Yeah, Quinn's done a great job. I think Sean McDermott in Buffalo deserves a lot of praise as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm leaning McDermott or Johnson in Detroit, but I think Tomlin and Quinn are right in the discussion.
Well, this discussion has been amazing. This has been a great family meeting, Appreciate you all jumping on and giving me all your expertise. These three that are on the screen with me are simply the best, and I really, really appreciate the time, and I appreciate everybody for tuning into the Sideline Report. So for Donna, for Felix, and for Scott, I'm Lou Holder. Thanks for watching the Sideline Report. Enjoy the rest of your bye week, and we'll see you next week on the Sidelines.